I'm starting by introducing myself. My name is Cyril Svoboda. I am from Prague. I am the owner and director of the Diplomatic Academy in the Czech Republic, strictly private, strictly independent. Now, we are to open the debate because the item we are to discuss is really very, very important. Eastern Partnership. EU and NATO, we can say Europe is to be a center of power. And to be a center of power, in my view, the EU and NATO must be capable of being truly integrated, sticking together. At the same time, to be capable of the enlargement, speaking about the Eastern Partnership. And you know, I was there last year, and we spoke about Russia, maybe the necessity or the possibility of the transformation of Russia. At that time, so we could read on the newspapers, Ukraine, 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 Ukraine. And today, we are speaking about the Eastern Partnership, and what we are now reading on the newspapers, migration, migration, migration. Something has happened. And the question is, to what extent EU is sticking together, NATO is sticking together to be strong enough for the enlargement. In the past, maybe there are some Trojan horses in EU. Now there are some, maybe the new ones, speaking about the migration, nobody knows. So that's why I am to ask all the panelists to tell us from your perspective, your perception of the real situation today, so as far as the Eastern Partnership concerned. So we will start with State Minister of Georgia for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, not cooperation or but partnership, but integration, David Bakradze. Minister, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, of course, when we are talking about the Eastern Partnership, we are talking about the countries and those who, despite military pressure, despite hybrid warfare, despite a lot of economic or information warfare, are maintaining strong support to the European and Euro-Atlantic integration, to our aspirations that is based on the values, which I think is the key here, because values were the one attacked in Georgia in 2008, the values were attacked in Ukraine and are being attacked, and values are what we consider to be our own. And although for us and for the Eastern Partnership, it has really did a great deal of work in progressing our countries, those who aspire to integrate further, to the signing of association agreement, to the possible visa liberalization, hopefully, fingers crossed, waiting for it. This is not an end goal for us. For us, it is important that we maintain this support with the idea of possible future full-fledged integration. And in that sense, to the countries that on this not an easy road, the road full of very demanding reforms, which was brought with the association agreement, deep and comprehensive free trade area, We are consistent, we are determined to deliver. We are full of hope that European Union is also ready to deliver back. So one way or another, with the Eastern Partnership as an instrumental or just moving on to some new phases of more integration, what we need is first more and more differentiation, so that countries which aspire, which are ready to move on, should be encouraged to do so. Countries who defend values should be encouraged to do so. Political strong messages and opening the European perspectives for the countries who have been fighting for it for over 2 decades should be allowed to do so. So for us, it is important that the countries like Ukraine, like Moldova, like Georgia, we have this European perspective, and we should look at it strategically. I think EU and NATO should look at it strategically, not reactively, but proactively, and later on we can discuss it in more details. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is a lady. As the green color shows us, you are the founding member of the Green Party in Germany, and Madame Marieluise Beck, she has been all the time involved in the question of migration, refugees, and integration. So welcome, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was taking over that office almost 15 years ago, and at that time Germany was at the point where we thought that actually we were no migration country. So if you look at the debate now, it has changed so rapidly that it's just unbelievable. You know, green parties have to be minorities to start with, but now that we have Chancellor Merkel, and she's having to struggle to keep up values which we call European values, is really a very funny development of history, but that's the way it is. You are right. At the moment, Germany is talking about nothing but refugees. You can't blame the people for it, because it's not a political debate on the level only. This is a reality which all people in our country are now being confronted with. No matter where you live, my daughter having small children, and the winter is coming, and in the afternoon when it's dark, you want to take them to sports because otherwise you go crazy. And she says, well, no sports anymore because all those places are now being used for refugees. So we have this debate in Germany, and we are not yet losing the total support of the population, but it is a very, very dangerous situation, because we know that we, of course, also in Germany have a potential of something like 25%, like Le Front National in France, or UKIP in Great Britain, Jobbik in Hungary and other countries. So number one is that in our internal politics, we have to manage to hit both tasks. On one side, to not let us force into an acting which does not belong to Europe, which means building fences and shooting at people so that they don't get in. This can't be European. But on the other side, we have to see that we don't have right extremist or left extremist forces becoming stronger and stronger, who both are fighting against the European Union. And unfortunately, Kremlin, and I just heard that they are working in a pretty smart way. They have understood that a long time ago. It's not a surprise that they are financing Le Front National, that Marine Le Pen is meeting Mr. Narishkin steadily, and that right-wing European parties are meeting in Vienna, assisted by Mr. Dugin, who is giving the nationalistic and chauvinistic ideology for all those people. So I'm very worried about this development within Europe, which of course links to the question, what is going to happen to the countries outside of Europe, who, when we started with the Eastern Partnership in 2008, we thought with the Eastern Partnership might be an intelligent idea of starting a path towards European Union with some of the countries then entering, joining the European Union, with others maybe making different decisions. And if to be honest, and I'm very, very eager to see how the development in Poland is going to be, because obviously the question of refugees and more nationalistic egoism has led to decisions of voters in Poland. At the moment, I lack the fantasy talking about enlargement strategies within our countries and having open hearts and open ears for it within our population. And on the other side, I think, at least in Germany, our population and parts of the political elites have not understood yet how decided and aggressive is Russia taking step by step strategically. And that leaves the country who I would have wished would be in a safe, good surrounding to go into the transformations which they definitely lead for the good of the people. Those transitions are going to be much more difficult under those pretty bad circumstances that have developed.
Thank you. The next speaker is the minister, Minister Pavlo Klimkin. So he is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. So he is the right person to tell us from your perspective. So what is your comments on the situation as far as the Eastern Partnership concerned today?
Thanks a lot, and it's a pleasure to see a great crowd talking about the Eastern Partnership and its perspectives now. Just a couple of points to start with. Firstly, I remember quite well 2003, when the whole exercise, not just about the Eastern Partnership, but about the European neighborhood policy started. And the whole great and fine idea about the area of prosperity and stability. And we have to admit we failed on this idea. We together failed on this idea, the European Union at the same time. And it's important to have a sort of honest analysis. Why? Now discussions and speculations started in Germany, in France, and many countries in the European Union that probably the European Union should have done more about approaching Russia, taking on board Russian sensibilities, Russian interests, Russian perceptions. My point is a different one. I believe the real failure of the European Union is in the lack of decisiveness, in the lack of unity and solidarity, in pushing forward the whole idea of embracing the Eastern partners. And the European Union paid a lot for that. But now it's a point of no return where such lack of decisiveness would start to bear on the whole essence of the European Union. Because as Marieluise has just said, the Russians are smart enough to understand one simple point. For Putin, it was his pet idea to set up a sort of unique partnership between the Eurasian Union and the European Union. And because his mentality is purely geopolitical, it's not just about trade and all kinds of trade-offs with technologies and resources. It's about unique partnership balancing US and China. And it's the only way how he believes he could stay in this play. Now there is no way to set up this partnership. So the only option to pull it off is to change the European Union. And it's exactly the point, because they've been working in a very consistent and committed way to change traditional politics in France, in Germany, in Austria, in many countries. Here in Poland is of course much more different because of many reasons, but it will come. And the Russians are good enough in trading instability like a sort of commodity on a stock exchange. A bit of instability there, a bit of instability in Georgia, Moldova, Balkans, Syria, Middle East. And having a lot of points of instability, you have the whole table in front of you. It's like chess play, You could be better on chess plays, but it could be a dangerous place for everyone. So my second point, I always said that what we needed from the European Union is solidarity and engagement. Now we have solidarity in the sense of consistent position, in the sense of sanctions, but we need to understand what kind of engagement is needed. And of course, it's a great point to give a bit of money to a country and say, you should get better, you should reach a couple of benchmarks. And it's a good concept. But it's difficult to get on board the same concept in the countries under either direct Russian aggression, as Ukraine, or indirect at the moment, like Georgia, or I would say direct, or Moldova. So we need a kind of different concept to embrace. And my answer to that is engagement. One is solidarity, and second, engagement. We need to find out the way how to take a number of critical areas in any of our countries and to get this reform through on the basis of the principle of co-ownership. And we keep mentioning co-ownership, but we have not done enough to realize that. It's about doing it together. It's about getting also the results together. And it's about recognizing that we are the part of European space, European history, European mentality. It's high time. And it's a point of no return when Marieluise mentioned the whole flow of refugees is unprecedented in the sense of changing not just politics in the European Union, but also what is called normal life. And further challenges, and I mean internal security challenges and other challenges, will be enormous. Now we've been facing also the famous referendum in the Netherlands, And not about actually our agreement, which is formally about our agreement, but about Dutch European policy. So it's going from the purely political and geographical domain into a purely societal domain now. And because of that is probably my last point, and a very simple one. I always said that the European Union needed a comprehensive and consistent policy towards something, towards the Middle East, towards Russia, towards many important issues. And the European Union is still, trying to sort out issues without addressing their roots, not fully, of course, but in many important points. And it's exactly the high time to embrace everyone who could be aboard and who could deliver on the European project as we all understand it, in the sense of European model, with European values as a basis. And in our association agreements, I mean in Ukrainian and Georgian, it's the same set of European values as is in Lisbon Treaty. It's the same value-based society. Of course, we are not there yet, but we can be there with the help of the European Union, and it should be, both ways. So on that basis, it's a high time to address what is critical in the sense of stability of the whole Europe, and in the sense of pulling off the whole European project as a value-based, effective project which is competitive in the global world. And the global world will be changing extremely rapidly.
Thank you. The next speaker is the former member of the European Parliament, assistant professor in Institute of Political Science of the Polish Academy of Science, Paweł Kowal. So please.
Thank you so much, Cyril. If I may, I will switch into Polish. To zabrzmi tak. Musimy... Okay, I will wait. Thank you. Cyril, I have for you. Sorry. Thank you so much. Więc kluczowa teza brzmi tak. Przywrócić polityce wschodniej strategię średniookresową. Bo myślę, że to, o czym mówiła pani poseł, czyli problem uchodźców, 2 lata temu aneksja Krymu i interwencja zbrojna w Donbasie, w gruncie rzeczy skoncentrowały całą uwagę polityki europejskiej, jeśli chodzi o politykę wschodnią, sfokusowały ją wyłącznie na rozwiązywaniu zasadniczych, doraźnych problemów. Na tym tle Partnerstwo Wschodnie, czy dyskusja na temat Partnerstwa Wschodniego nowej generacji, Partnerstwa Wschodniego 2.0, właściwie wydaje się być takim akademickim zajęciem, bo można powiedzieć tak, że minister Klimkin nie ma na to czasu, polska dyplomacja nie ma na to czasu. Jak tylko ktoś próbuje powiedzieć, usiądźmy, porozmawiajmy o Partnerstwie Wschodnim, inny mówi, dobrze, ale mamy falę uchodźców. Ja myślę, że te zmiany polityczne, które idą w Polsce, jak każde zmiany, dają szansę też na pewien element nowego otwarcia. Myślę, że należy wykorzystać także te relacje środkowoeuropejskie, które dzisiaj są wzmacniane przez prezydenta, do tego, żeby po pierwsze znaleźć partnerów w Europie Środkowej, po drugie spróbować narzucić na forum europejskim dyskusję na 2 tematy. Pierwszy temat to podsumowanie dotychczasowej aktywności i efektywności Partnerstwa Wschodniego. Drugi temat to wyjście z propozycją naszą, albo polską, albo środkowoeuropejską, nowego Partnerstwa Wschodniego czy Partnerstwa Wschodniego uzupełnionego. Mamy do czynienia pierwszy raz w historii polityki wschodniej Unii Europejskiej z sytuacją, w której Polska, zwykle to było Polska z kilkoma partnerami, w gruncie rzeczy nie wychodzi ze swoją całościową propozycją. Jeśli Państwo cofną się na przykład do 2003 roku i przyjrzą się, jak Polska jeszcze wtedy, nie będąc w Unii Europejskiej, można powiedzieć, nie mając tytułu, twardo dyskutowała w tym okresie, o którym mówił Paweł Klimkin, o polityce sąsiedztwa, jak przedstawiała swoje wnioski. Jeśli Państwo wrócą do tego, co ja wielokrotnie krytykowałem, czyli 2008 rok i ostateczny kształt Partnerstwa Wschodniego, bo zawsze uważałem, że tam jest za mało. Ale jednak to daje pewien poziom, no, do którego nie trzeba dorównać, tylko który trzeba przeskoczyć. Wnioski dzisiaj są takie. Po pierwsze, wyraźnie Partnerstwo Wschodnie podzieliło się na dwie grupy i tutaj musi nastąpić dywersyfikacja. Moim zdaniem trzeba sobie to odważnie powiedzieć, chociaż komuś to się może nie podobać. Dzisiaj są w Partnerstwie Wschodnim 3 kraje, w których reformy poszły znacznie dalej, które podpisały umowy stowarzyszeniowe i które muszą mieć nowy mechanizm, szczególnie mechanizm antykryzysowy, gdyby wewnątrz tych krajów zdarzyły się jakieś problemy społeczno-polityczne, które by mogły zakwestionować całą drogę na zachód. Czyli w przypadku Gruzji, Ukrainy i Mołdawii musi być zaproponowany nowy mechanizm, który jest także w interesie Unii Europejskiej i Zachodu, który będzie można włączyć w momencie, kiedy by się okazało, że pojawiają się poważne problemy polityczne. Oczywiście dzisiaj, na przykład wybory samorządowe na Ukrainie pokazują, że władza pomajdanowa jest jeszcze relatywnie silna. Ale nasze doświadczenie z podobnymi, z historiami transformacji w Europie Środkowej jest tutaj jednoznaczne. Ośrodek reformatorski na Ukrainie musi mieć pewność, że istnieje jakiś arsenał środków politycznych w sytuacji, gdyby potrzebne było okazanie zainteresowania Europy, takie wyraźne, jednoznaczne w razie jakiegoś kryzysu. I trzeba też sobie powiedzieć wyraźnie, że nie ma żadnego Partnerstwa Wschodniego, ani tego, które było, ani tego, które mam nadzieję będzie udziałem także polskiej dyplomacji w przyszłości. Nie ma żadnego dobrego Partnerstwa Wschodniego bez reform na Ukrainie. Dzisiaj przećwiczyliśmy to bojem. Każde Partnerstwo Wschodnie i każda polityka wschodnia Unii Europejskiej w gruncie rzeczy zależy od tego, jak przebiega proces transformacji na Ukrainie. Mamy oczywiście drugą grupę państw, które są jakby w drugim kręgu Partnerstwa Wschodniego i to też są fakty. Nie ma co się o to gniewać. To jest Białoruś, Azerbejdżan i Armenia. W przypadku tych trzech państw powinna być pokazana perspektywa długookresowa, skoncentrowana na współpracy w obszarze społecznym, ze szczególnym wzmocnieniem tego obszaru współpracy, który budowałby relacje, szczególnie w obszarze edukacji i kultury. Instrumentem, który by to wszystko spinał, powinien być projekt Uniwersytetu Partnerstwa Wschodniego, który byłby widocznym znakiem łączącym stare Partnerstwo Wschodnie z nowym Partnerstwem Wschodnim. Proszę Państwa, ja nigdy nie wierzę w te dane, ale są dane, które powinny na Państwu zrobić wrażenie, na mnie zawsze robią wrażenie. Wczoraj słuchałem debaty studentów Kolegium Europejskiego w Natolinie, w którym pracuję i studenci powiedzieli mi, że w ramach programu Erasmus i wymiany studenckiej w Unii Europejskiej zostało poczętych 1 000 000 Europejczyków. To jest fakt, który powinien przemówić do wyobraźni. Dlatego kluczem jest i spięciem tego wszystkiego jest edukacja, uniwersytet i budowanie wspólnej elity. Z kim robić projekt Partnerstwa Wschodniego 2? Projekt Partnerstwa Wschodniego 2 powinien być projektem pierwszym takim w historii Unii Europejskiej na wschód, z pełnym partnerstwem naszych partnerów, tych, którzy są zainteresowani. Znaczy myślę, że dzisiaj jednym z najwyraźniejszych sygnałów wysłanych do elit politycznych i opiniotwórczych na Ukrainie, w Gruzji czy Mołdawii byłoby zaproszenie do współpracy i to powinna być inicjatywa między innymi polskiej dyplomacji. Ja to widzę tak. Dobre i słuszne zaangażowanie ośrodka prezydenckiego w Polsce i osobiście prezydenta w budowę sieci powiązań między trzema morzami. Myślę, że można troszeczkę łagodniej z tymi historycznymi kalkami. Ale to przyniesie efekt. To potrzebuje drugiego płuca. Potrzebuje drugiego płuca w postaci budowy powiązań pomiędzy państwami Partnerstwa Wschodniego. I tutaj jest rola dla polskiej dyplomacji. Proszę Państwa, my stoimy przed takim wyborem. Albo ktoś za kilka lat powie w Europie, czy zdefiniuje sytuację tak, jak definiowano ją po rozszerzeniu. Pamiętacie Państwo, do wystąpienia berlińskiego, Sikorskiego mówiono, że były same kłopoty, że wszystkie kłopoty Unii wynikały z tego, że było rozszerzenie. Ja się boję, że też zostanie przez kogoś nieżyczliwego zdefiniowane Partnerstwo Wschodnie, a szczególnie jego skutki. To my powinniśmy zdefiniować skutki Partnerstwa Wschodniego, powiedzieć, co się udało, a udało się dużo, bo udały się umowy stowarzyszeniowe i powiedzieć, że z tego wynika konieczność pójścia o krok dalej. Jeśli tego nie zrobimy, to pogląd, który dzisiaj jest gdzieś tam szeptany na korytarzach europejskich, że to Polska wyciągnęła Unię Europejską na dzikie pola i że to Polska, że Sikorski wciągając Bildta, też trochę czeską dyplomację wówczas, wyciągnęli Europę na wschód i że to była prawdziwa przyczyna późniejszej polityki rosyjskiej. Nasz brak aktywności, pasywność może doprowadzić do tego, że po 10 latach w książkach politologicznych tak będzie opisana przyczyna neoimperialnej polityki Rosji. Możemy jeszcze tego uniknąć poprzez powrócenie do tego średniookresowego oddechu i niedopuszczenie do tego, by w dealu z Rosją, który się w oczywisty sposób szykuje, leżało na stole także Partnerstwo Wschodnie. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you. Because we are speaking in the alphabetic order, we didn't start with the lady, but we are, due to the alphabetic order, to address last but not the least the professor Artur Nowak-Far. He is an expert on the European law, the advisor to the government, and he is current Undersecretary of the State. So, Professor, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I think we can now switch to English again, although I really love Polish. With regard to the neighborhood policy and Eastern neighborhood policy, the format we have right now have proven to be sufficient to provide for enough flexibility and for enough stimuli which would make it possible to change that format as we need it. And that means that we will be able to reflect within the format again on any challenges and any needs which are pressing on us right now, and which for sure would be also exerting some pressure in the future. Well, the good part of it is that even now we can say that within the Eastern neighborhood policy, we were able to differentiate our Eastern partners in such a way which would make it possible for them and for us to distinguish the needs and to address the needs in the more or less adequate way. we should remind ourselves that, well, within this, this format, we should not lose the values which are underlying the whole project and which would make it possible also for the European Union to give clear signals to the Eastern partners of what our European Union's interests are as well. In other words, in very plain terms, it means really that, of course, we need each other, but everybody will have to think of their own commitments very seriously. And of course, by saying that, I treat it as a clear signal that Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia have entered definitely the stronger and more visible path towards the European integration. And I think it is a good thing because that would mean that they are to a great extent mimicking our own, I mean the Eastern and Central European EU member states' path towards the integration. What does it mean? Actually, it means that to a great extent the integration path is known. So it's lacking, like, you know, haphazardous, strange, surprising elements to a great extent, of course, not entirely. And we know for sure what the end results of the process would be. We know also that very important within this process, within this path from now to the future, is that those three countries and even all the Eastern neighborhood policy counterparts to the European Union will have to think of the strengthening of their own state apparatus. They will think of, they will have to undertake a great reform which would make their own institutions stronger and more resembling the model which is ready to apply, and this is the European Union model. Well, wrapping it up, I would like to summarize that I think that the format we are talking about historically and we are trying to conceive for the future is just great, just very good for our mutual needs, as it is able to reflect well our own interests despite of any possible challenges to or differences within that realm, and it is also able to give a good direction to the change. It's almost like a sort of a roadmap to stability, peace, and modernization. And moreover, that model has proven to be rigid in a form that it is sustainable despite all the challenges and all the undermining elements with regard to the most important values it is to produce, and it is to nurture, and it is to bring up to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I give the floor all of you to react with maybe my small provocative question. One is, we have spoken, and all of you have spoken about the European values. Me, I do not understand what does it mean. So my question is, what does it mean, European values for the citizens? It is the single market, the social standard, democracy, liberalism. Because when I was minister, so we were campaigning in my country. We were speaking about the European values, and the question is: so, what type of values are you to introduce to the Czech society? The same question is for your country, minister. So, in Georgia.
Thank you very much. I think
you can react for all the participants.
Thank you. In your previous question, you have mentioned the Trojan horse, and I think that in Georgia and in many of the countries, one of the strongest way of, let's say, representing the aggressive policy of Russian Federation is aggressive propaganda, which is directed against the exact values. For us, throughout the years, the reforms that we have been undergoing were serving the democracy, open society, good governance, rule of law. And that is the values that we want our societies to be based upon. But together with that, there is a very big set of reforms within the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Area Agreement, which is also something that requires strong dedication, because it is in many ways very sensitive reforms and very demanding from the government. So we understand the importance of it, and therefore we try to follow the reforms with the strategic communication with our population. This is important. But when we look at the Russian narrative, it's not only this. In many and in the strongest way, Russian propaganda is directed to showing unattainability of this process, unattainability of the integration of Georgia towards EU and NATO, showing that these are not the countries that European Union or NATO cares about or thinks about. Therefore, I think one of the strong political messages in that regard would be the messages that would prove that they are wrong. In the period of the very problematic irregular migration, and please believe we fully understand the gravity of the situation, the acceptance and the form of acceptance like visa liberalization and regulated mobility versus irregular migration would really show, on the one hand, prove it wrong, what the Russian narrative said, but also on the other hand show that the reforms that countries undergo is something that EU is ready to reflect upon. This will be a good message also in the conflict regions which are created in the Eastern partner countries, to show to our citizens residing in annexed or occupied regions that this is the way where you could see your country developed. Also, this is a good example to show to the other countries of the Eastern Partnership not being so dedicated that the countries that deliver can get further integration and can move forward towards European goals. And in that sense, there are several small and tangible results that we could benefit from within the Eastern Partnership. This is European perspective, showing that countries, those who are aspiring, who are ready to move on and continue their reforms according to the association agreement approximation with the EU acquis and DCFTA. This is visa liberalization. This is full use and best use of deep and comprehensive free trade area, and showing that open market and freedom of movement is something that the countries, those who have the same values, can benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe the next question from Madame Marieluise Beck. You have spoken about the extremism on the political scene. Marine Le Pen, La Front National, and the other forces. And vis-à-vis the migration, we have to stop the war in Syria. And now we can see a very strong engagement of Russia in Syria. So what's your comment on this issue? Because for some people, Putin could be perceived as a man of action, but EU is an entity of discussion. So Syria, migration, and
Okay.
of course the linkage with the
Well,
Eastern
if
Partnership.
there were not enough problems on this world with the Eastern Partnership, no, you now even give one more and bigger problem to me. Thank you very much for that. May I first react on this idea of visa liberalization and giving mobility to people, giving hope to them. Unfortunately, I have a bad news to bring. We did give a visa liberalization to most of the Western Balkan countries a few years ago. I know that our Minister of Interior, like they always are, were very critical because they were afraid of migration. We gave it to those countries and nothing happened. Wonderful. And in 2014, last year, the people from the Western Balkans started to migrate. And until a few weeks ago, the challenges of helping so many people who were seeking for help and protection were not only about Syria, which everybody would understand, but 40 to 45% of the people living in German refugee homes came from the Western Balkans. This is a bad news for the idea of visa liberalization, which I'm really fighting for since I'm in foreign politics. But obviously the question, what is happening inside the countries, and I think this is very much about good governance, is the main part of the question whether people decide to stay or to go. And if they have the feeling, no chance anymore, like take Kosovo, it was the well-educated people there who left, like we know now. It was after the elections had brought about the feeling to the people, we can elect whoever we wanted, the outcome will always be the same, because those guys up there are making their plot and they are going on, those political elites are going on with their games. So I think I will answer Syria, but it's so complicated that I will go back a little bit to the question of Eastern Partnership first. The problem is, I think, is that it's a question of time. We lost trust within the population of the European Union. We lost trust in the population with the financial crisis, because what you could see was that global markets were moving very, very fast, and politics was way too slow to find the answer. So you had people losing their homes, you had people being unemployed. We have within the European Union 27 million young people without job who have already the feeling we have no future. And if you have a lack of trust within those 500 million people within the European Union, how can you tell them and ask them, now let's take the next step, make our region even wider, include more people? It is a challenge which is getting too big. And on the other side, those countries of the Eastern Partnership who you can't even compare anymore. If you take Armenia, who now has been forced into joining the Eurasian Union, and Azerbaijan having democratic internal lax pressure, which does not have anything to do with European ideas. You know, you look at those countries, they are so different. And Ukraine having an aggression, a war inside the country, which at the moment has been stopped, but nobody knows when it might be opened again. And Georgia lost 20% of its territory. So actually, we would need time within the European Union to regain trust within our population. You guys would need time to go through those transformation processes which is a lot about trust also. Do the people trust you enough that if, like in Ukraine, they now have to pay 3 or 4 times as much for energy than before, do they trust you enough that this will lead to a good future? That then they will be willing to go along with you when they are convinced it will work. But if they don't trust your political elites, if they hear and see and feel we have political elites who are not modest, who are not trustworthy, and who are not responsible. You have them all over the world. You have them in some transformation countries in an extreme form. You have them in Russia as a system which in former times was being called KGB. If you don't get time, it's going to be very difficult, and the aggression is taking away time from you because everybody now has to work on something different. And now I come back to Syria. Yes, you named it. It's like playing chess. And obviously, Kremlin has a good analysis of European weakness with internal problems, of United States undecidedness, and they jumped into a conflict which at that time started as a population not fighting against a regime which is so dramatically cruel, which we don't even talk about. We don't want to see it, because we say, well, it might be something for stability, which is Assad. And we push away the knowledge we could have about, it was not only that the young people couldn't get into internet, it was really that thousands and 10,000s have been tortured in Assad's basements. And he even had doctors making photos of it, which we now could see in the UN. So undecidedness there, and of the West, what to do. Saudi Arabia is not a real nice partner either. Iran isn't, if you look at human rights and democracy. And Russia jumped in, and now, due to the weakness, it is back at the table. And if you listen to the debate, it is, well, now please accept the facts. Russia is back, and now we will have to deal. The problem is going to be, I would say, outcome open. What I think has happened and what I understand from Syria is that those in the middle, like we call the, not democratic, but the oppositional forces against this cruel Assad regime, they are being squeezed between either IS or Assad. Mm. And in the end, this is the choice the West will have, either IS or Assad. It's going to be a terrible choice, and I see the danger that this might be the outcome, and this we will have to talk about because it has something to do with Putin's decidedness and the West's undecidedness, long debates of how to act, and of course, democratic decisions where our people don't want to go along anymore with too many experiments outside of our countries.
Thank you. So, I'm sorry, but we are under pressure of time. Maybe we have less 10 minutes. So that's why I'm going not to raise any question, but I am going to give you the chance to react if you want, all the other panelists, Minister Klimkin and the others, and to have some time for maybe 1-2 questions. No questions. No democracy, no questions. Please, Minister, European values.
So, we were looking forward for questions, as I understand, but we've touched upon a number of issues. So let me react on a couple of your previous points. One is definitely about European values. and I believe it's indeed an important one, because we have basic values like freedom, like rule of law, like respect for the human rights, but the same values are entrenched in the US, in Australia, in all civilized countries. What is special about European values we are talking about? And I have my answer. I never pretend it is the right one, actually. But I believe the right set of special European values. And the most important of them is diversity, and as a value, respect for diversity, for any kind of diversity. It's indeed a special European value. You can find respect for diversity also in other societies, but it's normally played out in a completely different way. Secondly, is tolerance, of course, because tolerance is something especially European. And the ability to have a sort of special look back on our common DNA, and I mean history, not in the sense of process, but in the sense of a set of cultural and other values. So in this sense, there are European values. And I believe, and I can talk about that for hours, that Ukraine is a part of this European space, also in the sense of values, in the sense of mentalities. You know, with all kind of Soviet regime thriving in Ukraine for 70 years. The second point I wanted to address specially is, of course, visa-free. For me, of course, it's about mobility, but it's too bureaucratic. You know, it's not a real problem to get a visa, to get a Schengen visa in Ukraine. You know, it's difficult in the sense of procedures, it's difficult in the sense of time, but generally, it's not, you know, a problem you can't overcome. But it's about completely different perception for people-to-people contacts, and for the point of freedom, and for the point of belonging to this Europe. Because there are things which are, you know, not just typical, but entrenched for some societies. In US, you can go to a shop if you are a normal citizen and buy weapons. In Germany, you can drive, you know, an Autobahn with 250. And it's difficult, yeah. Now it's more contentious, especially with the last wave. But for many Ukrainians, it's not a point of getting or not getting visa. It's a point of belonging to the whole European space. And in this sense, I believe the European Union missed a chance to have an honest discussion and an honest answer on the point. Why exactly 2014, the whole wave from Kosovo? Why exactly 2014? As well as the last wave of refugees from the Middle East. I mean, I've been following European media. The question probably are still addressed in the media, but at the level of politics, it's not addressed in the honest way. Let's be, you know, direct and straightforward of that. Why exactly now? And without addressing these questions, or even for the European politician, and explaining to the citizens that they missed a number of chances, they missed to work out, you know, a credible strategy, not talking about tactics, it's difficult to explain why the European Union is now facing the whole set of challenges regarding migration. It should be either an honest discussion or actually more the same. And I believe, and it's my personal point, you know, not just of a Ukrainian foreign minister, the European Union simply can't afford to do more of the same. Because otherwise it will be a sort of different drive of changing politics. It's already underway. Look on not just, on Spain with new political parties. It's not the same political landscape. And it could change extremely quickly, in a couple of years. So we could have completely different Europe politically. And for many people, it will be real fun, for Putin, of course. But whether for us, for our understanding of Europe and for our understanding of Europe, for the European project, it will be real fun, it's an issue. And because of that, to be decisive, to be consistent on all these exercises we discussed, not just visa-free, not just FTA exercises, of course talking to the Russians, but in a way having a kind of critical dialogue with understanding that it should be proceeded from the point of solidarity, and not just European solidarity. European solidarity is not enough. It was enough a couple of years ago, but now it's about clear transatlantic dimension. And it's a very important point for Poland. It was a very important point for Poland, but especially important in the present time.
Thank you. Now, Paweł, so the floor is yours.
Wartości. Okej. Wartości europejskie, które dzisiaj są atrakcyjne. Ja myślę, że warto w takich sytuacjach wracać do klasycznej lektury Neya i powiedzieć, co dzisiaj jest miękką siłą Europy. Czyli co dzisiaj powoduje, że ludzie na Ukrainie, w Mołdawii, w Gruzji mówią, chcemy żyć tak jak u was. Bo to w istocie o to chodzi. Przecież nie chodzi o to, że komuś się Europa podoba, bo są zasiłki i chce się przedostać do Europy i być do Unii Europejskiej i być po drugiej stronie tej wschodniej granicy Unii Europejskiej. Siła Europy, jeśli będzie, nie będzie dotyczyła wojska, mówię o Unii Europejskiej, będzie dotyczyła właśnie tego miękkiego oddziaływania. A miękkie oddziaływanie to jest opieka prawna, parasol prawny dla dwóch rzeczy w gruncie rzeczy. Dla konkurencji i gospodarki, w której każdy może się bogacić. To są bardzo proste rzeczy. Ludzie z Ukrainy czy z Gruzji przyjeżdżają do Belgii, do Niemiec, do Francji i dochodzą do wniosku, że każdy ma szansę. A żyją w swoim kraju do niedawna rządzonym przez Janukowycza i widzą, że szansę ma tylko 0,5% populacji. Miękka siła Europy dotyczy też drugiej kwestii, czyli praw obywatelskich i wszystkiego, co się z tym wiąże. Wyborów, prawa do tego, żeby startować w wyborach, żeby głosować na kogo się chce, wolności prasy. Te dwa worki. To o te dwa worki chodzi. W jednym jest to, co dotyczy konkurencji i szansy dla każdego, a w drugim jest to, co dotyczy praw obywatelskich. A Unia Europejska proponuje, że da do tego ochronę prawną. I jeżeli daje do tego ochronę prawną, to społeczeństwo może się normalnie rozwijać. I dzisiaj o to toczy się gra. Bo w tym się zawiera także odpowiedni system opieki społecznej, oczywiście. W tym się zawiera dużo elementów, które można powiedzieć bardzo prosto. I ty też masz szansę. Jeśli tego nie damy w postaci realizacji umów stowarzyszeniowych, tak jak w średniowieczu dostawaliśmy jako Polacy prawo magdeburskie, to jedynym marzeniem ludzi na wschodzie będzie wyjechać do nas. I z tego będą tylko kłopoty, bo potem się zaczyna problem migracji, imigracji i wszystkie rzeczy, które z tym się wiążą. Lepiej, żeby miękka siła Europy ciągle oddziaływała. Dziękuję bardzo.
May I say
So,
one?
no, I am sorry because
I would
I have
love
been
to
instructed
contradict with one.
yes, I have been instructed immediately to close the session, but to be fair, so Professor, maybe one sentence.
Thank you. Well, maybe I will expand it a little bit, very briefly. The question about the European values, is quite. No, that is your answer. My answer would be independent of anything which is spoken from the audience. It is provided for in the relevant articles of the two legal instruments, that is the Treaty on the European Union and the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union. And indeed, it had a large list of those values. I will just quote or give you a handful of those: respect for human dignity, sustainability of economic development, equal rights, respect for diversity, rule of law, efficient allocation of resources, and so on. It all creates an Arcadian or utopian picture. And what we need is to always be very alert to properly somehow order those values, respond within these values to the incoming challenges, and all be able to really fulfill the promise which is behind those values. And that is where sometimes Europe fails, because on technical terms, when it comes to the allocation of resources, when it comes to economy, it's quite effective, quite frankly. We can, of course, complain, but I don't think we have a good reason to do that. But when it comes to, the values which are of higher level, then Europe has a problem, and it needs to go back to those values, otherwise it would lose credibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm apologizing for extending the time. Thank you so much for the panelists, and I beg you for the applause for the panelists, and we will now break.